People who've worked for the ultra-wealthy tell us about their biggest and darkest secrets. Sponsored by Avia Sales. I once got hired for a private IT project for an insanely rich guy in Scottsdale, Arizona. His house sat high up near the desert foothills, with sweeping views over the city. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows, 8 feet tall at least, wrapped around the living room, letting in the fiery sunsets and the deep blue night sky. The place had that quiet kind of luxury you can't fake, not just expensive furniture, but custom everything, hand-carved stone walls, imported wood floors, a pool that seemed to spill over into the valley below. On paper, he had a ranch in West Texas that stretched over 40,000 acres, bigger than some towns, and had made his fortune in oil. But his biggest secret wasn't some crime or hidden vice. It was something far more human, and honestly, a little sad. He knew, without a doubt, that most people in his life, including his current wife, his 2 kids, and his 2 stepdaughters, only loved him because of his money. And he was sure that if the money disappeared, so would they. There were lots of little quirks in his home that caught my attention, but one burned itself into my memory. In the entryway of his guest house, the one meant for visitors who came to stay, hung a massive, tastefully framed, but still unmistakably nude painting of himself. Not in a comic way, either. It was styled like some Renaissance portrait, with dramatic lighting and all. I remember thinking, this can't be real, but it was. My friend works as an estate manager for a former Playboy model who was once married to a now-deceased multi-millionaire. Her mansion is a mix of old Hollywood glam and over-the-top personal vanity. Every wall seems to hold a different nude portrait of her, taken over the last 3 decades, each in a different artistic style, black and white photography, oil painting, sepia-toned prints. At first, my friend admitted she didn't know where to look when walking through the hallways. But eventually, it just became part of the background, like wallpaper. One time, I was asked to entertain a billionaire for an entire day. I didn't know at the time who he was. I just thought he was a relaxed, middle-aged guy who liked to keep things low-key. Turns out, this man had the kind of money that could quietly topple a small industry. But there was nothing showy about him. He wore worn-in sneakers, a faded t-shirt, and had the sort of easy smile you'd expect from a friendly neighbor. He seemed to enjoy the fact that I didn't know who he was, and more importantly, that I didn't care. I took him to a no-frills dive bar that smelled faintly of old beer and had a jukebox playing 70s rock. We ordered tacos from a food truck parked outside, leaning on the counter while the cook chopped cilantro and onions at lightning speed. Later, my boss told me the billionaire said it was one of the best days he'd had in a long time, and that I should get a reward. Still, for every down-to-earth rich person, there are plenty who are mind-bogglingly cheap. I sell wine and manage high-end wine cellars. One of my clients had a cellar worth over $10 million, rare first-growth Bordeaux, Grand Cru Burgundies, vintages you only read about in magazines. At his annual Christmas party, the one attended by his A-list friends and business partners, you'd expect these bottles to come out, right? Nope. He served $20 supermarket wine and basic cava. He passed away leaving that $10 million cellar untouched, like a buried treasure no one ever drank from. Back when I managed a Blockbuster store in a mid-sized city, we were located right where the middle-class neighborhood met the wealthy district. One afternoon, a middle-aged man stormed in, red in the face, shouting at one of my cashiers. He was furious over a late fee, exactly $2.14. He insulted the staff, demanded to see the person in charge. I walked over and explained it was a legitimate fee. He could pay or leave, otherwise I'd call the police. He cursed his way out the door. I stepped outside just to make sure he was really gone, and watched him get into a spotless, snow-white Rolls-Royce Phantom. That image stuck with me, a man worth who knows how much, raging over pocket change. I once installed a new security system for an elderly couple in Palm Beach, Florida. Their net worth? Well over $10 billion. The wife was the picture of kindness, the type who'd offer you lemonade if you passed her on the sidewalk. If I didn't know better, I'd think she lived a normal, comfortable life. Inside, though, everything was next level: custom furniture built to exact measurements, rare marble countertops imported from Italy, even their light switches had custom engravings. When the job was done, they sent me and my crew home with bags full of fresh produce from their private garden, perfectly ripe tomatoes, herbs that smelled like summer. There's an old saying, money talks, wealth whispers. In my experience, that's gospel truth. The truly wealthy don't need to prove it. They invest in quality, not in flash. My grandmother is one of the wealthiest people I know, yet she still drives a 15-year-old Toyota Camry. The car's a little scratched, the seats worn in, but she says it still runs like a dream. Step inside her home, though, and you see the truth: walls lined with paintings worth millions, sculptures in glass cases, rugs handwoven in Persia. Once, I complimented a painting in her living room. She casually said, "Take it," and insisted I keep it. Later I found out it was worth $20,000. For the last decade, I've worked as a private jet pilot for clients you've never heard of, not public names like Bezos, but low-profile billionaires who stay off magazine covers. Here's what I've learned. Money amplifies who you already are. If you're kind, it gives you the power to be generous on a whole new level. If you're cruel, it makes you untouchable and even more ruthless. They still have problems, often ones tied directly to their wealth: family feuds, spoiled kids, constant pressure to protect assets. They're insulated from consequences most people would face instantly, but they pay for it with paranoia. And here's the funny part: many of them are borderline hoarders. Behind grand gates and manicured lawns, you'll sometimes find a mansion cluttered like a college dorm, unopened packages, dusty furniture, whole rooms turned into storage. Being rich doesn't make you organized. The documentary The Queen of Versailles nailed that point perfectly. Officially, this man was divorced and remarried. In reality, he never divorced his first wife. The woman everyone thought was his second wife was actually his long-term mistress. He presented her to the world as his spouse at events, in family Christmas cards, even in charity galas. The real wife didn't mind, as long as the money and lifestyle stayed the same. But she had one unshakable rule: any children from the second woman would never have a legal claim to the family fortune. So, to keep his mistress secure, he purchased several income-generating properties in her name: high-end apartment buildings, luxury condos, retail spaces. Total value? Well over $100 million. The man thought of it as insurance. I've worked directly with 3 or 4 billionaires, managing ultra-luxury construction projects. These weren't remodel the kitchen type jobs. We're talking multi-year estate reconstructions, new mansions built from the ground up, sometimes on land the size of small neighborhoods. I've sat on their private jets, ridden on their yachts, been inside 3 of their 9 homes. I've driven their supercars, the kind most people only see at car shows, and once helped move a set of original Picasso paintings from one wing of a house to another. That house was so vast it took a golf cart to get from one end to the other. Here's the thing: a lot of them have no real grasp on how the normal world operates. They've been wealthy for so long, surrounded by people who handle every little inconvenience, that real-world logistics are foreign to them. Many live in constant fear: fear of being taken advantage of, fear of being targeted. I had one client, one of the richest women in California, who insisted on driving a humble Toyota Prius everywhere. Not because she cared about the environment, though she claimed she did, but because she thought it made her less of a target for criminals. She and her husband had round-the-clock armed security. Their mansion had motion sensors not just outside, but in hallways inside. She confided in me once that she never really slept through the night. Their kids? Often the most aimless, entitled people you'll meet. When you grow up in a bubble where nothing is earned, ambition tends to evaporate. Achievements are expected, not celebrated. I left that world because the stress was relentless. When a billionaire wants something, the expectation is that it will be done, yesterday. They throw money at your boss promises the moon, and you're the one who has to deliver the impossible. I also worked in a high-end jewelry and watch boutique in Beverly Hills. It was the kind of place with velvet-lined display cases, security guards at the door, and champagne on hand for special customers. Rich and famous clients wandered in all the time. Sometimes I got scolded for not recognizing them: wives of NBA stars, up-and-coming movie actors, reality TV personalities. There's a particular category of wealthy person who lives to make sure everyone around them knows just how rich they are. Some brands exist solely for that crowd, logos so specific that only others in that circle will recognize them. Many of the ultra-wealthy don't dress to impress in public. In fact, some look borderline sloppy: faded sweatpants, old baseball caps, worn sneakers. It's why you should never judge someone's financial status by their outfit. The guy in line at the coffee shop in gym shorts could own half the block. But here's the less charming side: they can be astonishingly petty. If there's even a sliver of personal gain, they'll throw you under the bus without hesitation. I've had people yell at me, throw merchandise, stage full-blown tantrums right in front of other customers. They do it because they know it gets results. And sadly, it often does. Working with their personal assistants was always better. A lot of them looked like they hadn't had a genuine conversation in months. Sometimes they'd come into the shop and start venting about politics or world events simply because no one in their bubble cared to listen. We weren't allowed to share our own opinions, so these chats were entirely one way. At another jewelry store I worked at, a woman walked in wearing old garden clogs and faded jeans. She chatted casually with the owner for 10 minutes, then, without blinking, paid $79,000 for an emerald and walked out. It was a reminder that true wealth often doesn't need a costume. Once, I stayed at an upscale hotel in New York City and got upgraded to a floor reserved for exclusive guests. The room itself was gorgeous, but the real perks were in the extras. A private lounge with gourmet appetizers, custom room scents you could choose from, and a personal concierge who seemed baffled that I didn't have any requests. Later that day, I was sitting in the lounge when a woman walked up to the concierge, handed him a sheet of paper with her clothing sizes, and told him to send athletic wear and sneakers to her room so she could use the gym. When he explained they didn't have a magic closet of clothes in all sizes, and suggested the Lululemon store 2 blocks away, she said, "Perfect. Have someone go pick it up for me. I like earth tones. Just charge it to my room." And she walked away before he could answer. They don't just dislike hearing the word no, they genuinely don't understand it. Back in college, I was close friends with a guy whose best friend's mom came from a family worth around $5 billion. We'd hang out at their home, which always had fresh meals brought in from high-end restaurants. Sometimes a private chef would cook in their kitchen just for fun. Every couple of months, we'd take the family's private jet to their condo in another city. The routine was always the same: limo to the hangar, step onto a jet stocked with food and drinks, and land with another limo waiting on the tarmac. Once, his weed dealer was out of town, and he asked me to bring him an ounce. At the time, good weed cost about $400 an ounce. I knew from past trips there was no security at their private hangar. For 20-year-old me, that was serious money. I decided to just pay for it myself. After the trip, riding in the limo back to the hangar, he rummaged in his bag, pulled out an envelope with $1,000 in it, and said, "Man, I completely forgot to give you this." He was young, generous, and surprisingly down-to-earth. I haven't seen him in 15 years, but that memory stuck with me. I never technically worked for the ultra-rich, but in my early 20s I was a delivery guy for a luxury furniture store that catered to them. Over the years, I made hundreds of deliveries to high-end neighborhoods, sprawling estates hidden behind wrought iron gates, manicured driveways, and front doors bigger than my entire apartment. Here's the thing: most of them will try to get the absolute maximum out of you for the absolute minimum in return. Countless times, we'd show up with a delivery, sometimes a single custom dining table or a $30,000 leather sofa, and the homeowners would suddenly ask if we could also move other furniture around their house. Not just shift it a few inches, but completely rearrange rooms, haul heavy armoires upstairs, or take old couches down to the basement. It was as if they thought we were a moving company, not a delivery service. If we refused, they'd call our manager and threaten to cancel their order entirely, or leave a terrible review. Eventually, our manager had to send a company-wide memo reminding clients, "We deliver furniture. We don't reorganize your entire home." Later, some of them tried bribing us with tips. A few times, when money was tight, we agreed. And more than once, they'd forget to actually give us the tip after we'd done all the extra work. Sometimes they'd invent some tiny complaint, like, that step didn't squeak before you carried the dresser upstairs, and imply they'd need to take the repair cost out of the tip. You could carry a 300-pound cabinet down into their basement without damaging a single wall, and they'd still act like you just crashed their car. I'm convinced that 90% of the ultra-rich people I've dealt with are stingy, entitled, and prone to abusing whatever power they have. Sure, there are exceptions, but they're rare. I've also done work in Los Angeles for celebrity interior designers. Through them, I've delivered furniture to A-listers and old-money families alike, Kanye, the Kardashians, Ryan Murphy, even Ringo Starr. Once, while delivering to an actress's home, I spotted something under her bed that I thought was a giant adult toy. Turned out it was some kind of specialty cleaning mop. Another time, I actually moved a bottle of lube off a nightstand so we could roll out a new carpet. Didn't realize what it was until my hand was slick and I read the label. The funny thing? These particular clients were cool about it. I just washed my hands, we all laughed, and kept working. But many ultra-wealthy people live in a bubble so far removed from reality that they honestly believe their success is purely merit-based, even if they were born into staggering wealth. And if they did earn it themselves, they'll never admit that luck played any role. Also, they simply don't process the word no. If you can't give them exactly what they want, you have to word it in a way that makes them feel like they're still in control. I'll make sure your suggestion gets passed along to see if we can change that policy in the future, that kind of thing. And no one loves a freebie quite like a rich person. My dad cleans houses, everything from tiny apartments to sprawling gated estates in Southern California. The biggest homes? Almost always owned by the stingiest and most judgmental people. One woman had a walk-in closet larger than our entire house, nearly 1,800 square feet, filled with designer shoes still in their boxes, handbags worth more than my car, and racks of dresses she'd never worn. She was also one of the rudest clients we'd ever had. In contrast, our middle-class clients were the best, generous with tips, always offering food or coffee. About 50 years ago, I worked for a number of people worth over $100 million each. Most were miserable, arrogant, and addicted to something: alcohol, pills, gambling. But there were rare exceptions. One billionaire I worked for as a groundskeeper would sometimes join me in planting vegetables or tending the garden. We'd talk while working, and he'd share bits of insight about the financial world, like how to offload risk onto others while keeping control and most of the profits. Surprisingly humble, he was one of the few genuinely pleasant ultra-rich people I met. I also work in luxury home construction, custom kitchens, spa-like bathrooms. One day, I returned to a mansion we'd completed 2 years earlier to take measurements for new work. A man I'd never met before answered the door. Turned out he'd married into the family. When I walked into the kitchen, I was shocked. It was chaos, dirty pots everywhere, cereal scattered across the marble island, a honey dipper lying in a sticky puddle. Usually, homes like this are professionally cleaned daily, almost sterile. The man laughed, apologized, and grabbed a sponge. "Just made breakfast for the kids," he said. Apparently, this was a normal thing for him: make a mess, clean it up himself. It was the most down-to-earth billionaire moment I've ever witnessed. I spent 8 years in the wedding industry, and I learned to spot ultra-rich clients from the first email. And most of the time, I refuse their business. When wealth is inherited or made recently in certain industries, the entire wedding becomes a performance, a $500,000 spectacle designed to impress. One client's wedding day schedule was broken into 5-minute increments. She later sent me a 6-page complaint letter because the golden hour for photos was delayed by 10 minutes due to champagne being poured too slowly. Another bride contacted me 6 months after her wedding to complain about a new receptionist we'd hired. He'd been an extra worker provided at no cost to her, but she didn't like his vibe. One particularly dramatic bride raged because her cocktail was served with 2 orange slices instead of 1. By contrast, working-class and old-money clients, especially those who built businesses themselves, were often gracious, generous tippers, and genuinely focused on the marriage, not the theatrics. Some wealthy families hide dark personal tragedies behind their perfect public image. I knew one family whose patriarch was celebrated as a self-made empire builder. Behind closed doors, he was abusive, to employees and, it seemed, to his own kids. One of his children died by suicide on Father's Day. Those close to the family saw it as a final act of defiance, a statement. But the public story was spun into a tragic accident. The truth was buried, the image preserved. Not all dark secrets involve cruelty, some are just bizarre excess. My stepdad once worked for a man who needed maintenance on his private jet. Instead of waiting 2 weeks for repairs, he simply bought another jet. He genuinely believed money could solve anything. In family arguments, rather than talk things out, he'd just buy his wife expensive gifts, thinking it would fix the problem. It didn't. His kids grew up never hearing the word no. Now, as adults, they have no concept that most people actually have to work to survive. In some countries, being rich means living like a target. My stepdad's mother hasn't left her fortified estate in over 5 years because she's terrified of being kidnapped. She lives just 45 minutes from one of the world's most beautiful beaches, and has never set foot on it. She's so lonely she employs a woman full-time just to keep her company, someone paid simply to be there. Here's the irony, many of these people don't even see themselves as ultra-wealthy, because they constantly compare themselves to those with even more. They measure success by who has the newer yacht, the bigger estate, the rarer art collection. Loss hits them hard, even when they're still richer than 99.9% of the planet. And yet, some hide their wealth so well you'd never guess. I once had neighbors in a modest suburban home with regular cars, nothing flashy. They'd disappear for months at a time, then return casually as if nothing happened. Eventually, I learned the husband was the CEO of a global corporation, with a net worth of over $500 million. I also worked briefly as a personal assistant to a billionaire. He was eccentric, but his wife was on another level. She'd have public meltdowns in her glass-walled office, crying, screaming at staff, over things as small as the wrong salad dressing or a 15-minute delay. Once, her speaking engagement was pushed back due to rain. I'd warned her hair stylist in advance, but she arrived at the original time anyway and lost it completely. When my boss confronted me, I explained what had happened. He cut me off and said, "Only losers apologize." For 1 week, I worked at a ranch owned by the inventor of a wildly successful adult product, the fleshlight. The place was like its own private resort, a Spanish-style villa with a grand fountain, a Roman-inspired pool surrounded by statues, a meditation garden, a private nightclub, even a massive barn. You'd think someone with that reputation would be a party animal, but he was surprisingly calm, spending his days riding an ATV around the property, birdwatching. His wife was kind, though a bit detached from reality. She lamented how hard it had become to buy authentic antiquities because of new international laws banning the export of cultural treasures. They treated me well, checked in daily, made sure I had enough water, chatted a bit each afternoon. But even the nicest ultra-rich people have quirks when no one's watching. They'll haggle over small expenses, hire the cheapest contractors, and skip tipping if they think no one will notice. I once had dinner with a wealthy friend who left just $5 on a triple-digit bill, slipping it under a napkin so the server wouldn't see. The same friend once bought me a soda for $1.50, then asked for the money back later because she'd gone over her snack budget, and kept the 50 cents change. That's the world of the ultra-wealthy, equal parts privilege, paranoia, and pettiness, with the occasional glimpse of genuine humanity.